Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Event Industry News podcast with me, James Dickson. As always, wishing you a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune in to today's podcast from. And I always go through that little sort of introduction, the good morning, afternoon, and evening, which I fell into by complete accident when we first started to record these podcasts 4 or 5 years ago. And it just became something that I say. And it's become more and more apt over in recent years as we welcome more and more guests from the other side of the pond, from our great friends over in North America, as our industry and our network of contacts and our network of podcast followers has expanded. And I'm delighted to say that we go over all the way to the other side of the USA today, over to LA, and welcome LA's #1 event planner, the absolute
Hello.
party goddess, who's anybody has been on social media will have seen this name crop up at some point. I'm absolutely certain about it. I'm really excited to welcome to the Event Industry News podcast today, Marley Majcher, the party goddess. Marley, thanks for joining us from LA this morning.
Well, thank you for having me. I love it. And I love the across the pond. Every time I hear like across the pond, I just want to go back across the pond,
Well,
so
absolutely.
it's so exciting.
And you join us today having just literally done that, haven't you? You've just gone
Yes.
transatlantic and landed back in LA from Dublin, I think you said you were at?
Yes. And through Heathrow. And I just was like, oh, I want to stay. Especially now because all the Christmas stuff and everything is coming. And I just,
Yeah.
Back to work. You know how it goes.
Back to work, and of course Thanksgiving over there for you guys tomorrow. I think we're recording this on the 24th of November. Just for some context for our listeners and our followers, depending on when this actually goes out and gets published. But yeah, Thanksgiving for you guys tomorrow. So party season presumably in full swing.
Yes, the madness is beginning, and I love Thanksgiving so much. I was thinking this yesterday because it's like here the world starts to slow down a little bit. It seems like, on Martin Luther King Day or on, any other kind of holiday, people can text and email and be like, but on Thanksgiving, it seems like really taboo to like have to work. I don't know why.
Right.
But it's like, and so I'm thinking it's so nice until Friday morning when
So you get 24 hours away from the
Exactly.
from the planning madness, and as I said, enthusiastically, and if there was any sort of humor detected in my tone on that intro, forgive me, because genuinely your reputation in LA is as the party planner. You've worked with a lot of names, both individuals and companies and organizations over the last few years. Would you mind sort of going back in time a little bit just at the start of this for people who maybe not so familiar with your work, and just tell people how you ended up in this business called events?
Okay, well, we were joking at the beginning of this isn't going to be a Seth Rogen podcast. It will be if we go that far, but I will try to make it super short. So I grew up in Pasadena, California, and then I got my business degree from Georgetown. And the summer before my junior year, I didn't have anything that was inspiring me. So I decided I'm going to go to I'm going to go to Paris to go to cooking school. And I did, and was in Paris the whole summer and came back and ran into my professor the first week of school. And I was, brown nosing, of course. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love, this one class that I was in. It was a speech class. And I said, listen, it was on what I knew more about than anybody else. And at Georgetown, it was literally absolutely nothing. And my mom was like, why don't you do it on French cooking? Because you definitely know more about that than those kids. So I was like, okay, that's true. So I said, listen, and I'm doing it on French cooking. And I have an interview with the chef from 1789, which is this very fancy restaurant, old school in DC. And she was like, oh my God, that's my favorite restaurant. So I go home in tears because I'm just like, oh my, how am I going to get this interview? Chefs are notoriously egotistical and whatever. So one of my roommates said, don't worry, I will set it up. He's brand new. He's from New York. He's too new to know that he can say no, So I was like, that's all I need is just to see him so that I'm not lying. And so I met him. And as soon as I met him, I decided I needed to marry him. And why not? And so I was 19.
Why not?
And he was 20 years older than I was. So that was one slight stumbling block. And then I was also, the kitchen of 1789 is in the basement. It's in the bowels of these, old little buildings. And I was like, and I am never going to see this guy again. I've got to think fast. So I noticed two things. This kind of starts playing in the business brain of mine, which is that he had souffles on the menu, and souffles are notoriously difficult for restaurants to have on the menu because, they can be overcooked or undercooked. They're a pain in the neck. It's all timing. And the second thing was that there were, of course, really no women in the kitchen, and everybody spoke Spanish, and he did not. And he would say he kind of did, but he didn't. And so I was like, okay, here's my in. I'm going, basically be the Spanish speaking souffle chef, right? So I think I had done a sum total of one souffle in cooking school, but I was like, I'm going to freaking figure this out. And this is before you could watch YouTube videos. So I, did my interview, and then I was like, okay, so like, can I shadow you again, kind of for my whole thing? And he was like, okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, you can come back like Tuesday or something. And I know he didn't think I was going to come. So I came back, of course, again in full hair and makeup, like ready to roll. And the long story short is that I got out of school at 2:30, and 3 days a week from 3:30 to 11:30, I did my shift and smiled and nodded as the makeup like melted off my face every night, never asked me out. And then finally, I went to cooking school in Normandy before my senior year. And I plotted the entire summer how I was going to ruin his life when I quit, and had this big announcement that. So I go back my senior year, and I was like, okay, school's too much. I've got to quit. Blah blah blah. So he asked me out, and then we were engaged the month after graduation, and came back to California. And if you marry a chef and you want to ever see them, you get into the same business as they are in.
Sure.
So he and I opened a restaurant, and then started a catering company from that, and took over an event planning space. And, there's so much to it that I even go over in my, I wrote a book to solve my own problems because I had many of them in business. And so, then you get to this point, and then shocker, he and I are having marital problems, and I'm having this bad skiing accident. And it was just like, literally, it was like a cluster. And so fortunately we owned the land that the restaurant was on. And so my dad said, listen, why are you doing this? Like, you love the parties. You don't love the restaurant business. You love the parties.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you do the parties, and we partner up, and you're going to make more money. I was like, no, because I will have failed. I'm thinking that, which is the biggest joke, because I was failing all over the place, right? I was the only one, I think, that kind of hadn't fully gotten the memo. And so finally, this skiing accident where I'm like in the full brace, I'm in rehab, I'm like, okay, and my job is standing, right? And I was just like, there's got to be a message here. So I said, fine. And so we did that, and we partnered up. And then in 2000, I started the Party Goddess. And I'm kind of laughing when you're saying LA's #1 party plan, because the reason everybody's like, how did you come up with that name? That's such a great name. And the reason I came up with it is because, it's like, for framework here, I'm going through a divorce, right? I've just been named Entrepreneur of the Year. And then the newspaper comes out and on the front page and says, oh, I'm a fraud or whatever, basically because, they didn't know the inner workings of how we'd cut this deal, and that I was, launching this event planning thing. So in the meantime, they come out with this, like, oh, she just won this thing and now her business is closing. And I was like, well, it's not. Here's the segue, but, that's a whole other story. And then, I have a 1-year-old, and I'm like, because my life looked amazing on the outside. And we all know, these days through social media, everybody's lives look amazing on the outside.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole point of the social media.
That's the whole point, right? Like, you're not going to post, and today I had gallbladder surgery. But, maybe actually I would. But so I was at this super low point in my life, and I was like, okay, obviously I need to do events. Like, what the heck? What is the name of my company going to be? And I was just kind of brainstorming, and I was like, the Party Goddess. Why not? Right? Like, what other kind of like phoenix could rise from the sun and come up with that name? And I remember, because LA, and New York here are two very competitive, very, very competitive markets.
I bet. Yeah.
And so it's total dog eat dog. And so I remember starting out, and my boyfriend at the time was in the industry, introduced me, and he was like, you can do this. Cause I was like, I can't. I'm like, blah. And so he was like, you can. And so he would introduce me, and he was like, and this is Marley, she's the Party Goddess. And I remember the first time he said that to a group of people, and they were like, the party goddess. Like, oh, and I just remember looking at them and just thinking, I'm gonna freaking eat you for lunch one day. And I was like, oh yes, I am the party goddess. Like if I have to be the party goddess, boy, I'm gonna be the party goddess. And so then, I started down this road, which is now, 21 years ago. And I really realized after that day, there's millions of event planners. I mean, the one statistic I saw was like there's like 486,000 event planner, English speaking event planners. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
So how do you stand out, especially since I'm already in this very competitive market? And that's when I decided, listen, I've got to find me some celebrities here, because if I don't, I'm just another bull, And those
Sure. Yeah.
the biggest thing people could do is like steal your pictures from your website. I mean, these days, forget it. Like, people steal your entire profile and identity.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
So I just was like, okay, how am I going to get, and it was literally like, how am I going to get me some celebrities? Because I was like, what am I going to do? And so I started after that goal, not knowing how I was going to get there, but thinking this was the ticket. And then slowly but surely, you get the Z list, and then, Z takes you to P list, and then you kind of get to E, and then you're at a D list. And then you sort of, the train is going. And I was like, if I can just keep kind of ratcheting this up and I can get a big name, then, because, right, we know that. I mean, supposedly, if the media says you're amazing, you're amazing. If a celebrity says you're amazing, which took me a long time to kind of drink that Kool-Aid, because it's like,
Sure.
listen, just, sort of amazing before, but now whatever. Okay.
Mm.
So, and then I remember it just started snowballing. And then we got Britney Spears, ironically, who's had a lot in the news lately.
Absolutely.
And,
There's somebody who needs to throw a party.
I was going to say, I mean, it's so funny because when I was in Dublin, they're like, don't you think you should reach out to her now? And I was like, oh my God, that is like the ultimate like ambulance chasing. But I was like, maybe. I mean, I don't,
Business is business.
Yeah, business is business. And so then, we got Pierce Brosnan, who's the nicest person in the history of the world. And then it was just like one thing after, and then I started kind of realizing how the game is played. It's sort of like when social media started, you didn't really realize how the game was played. Like that people, buy followers. That, I mean, there's all this stuff that kind of goes on behind the scenes. Which
Sure, yeah.
I just thought, oh, People Magazine hears about the event. Well, no, it's much more behind the scenes structured than that. And so my eyes opened like, wow, this is its own machine. But I was like, I better stay on this train if I want to stand out. And sure enough, I remember one of the things, I remember exactly where I was. It was spring break, or spring break time, whatever. And I was reading a magazine with one of my girlfriends, and some of my friends, could I mean, their family's net worth was 20 times these celebrities. I mean, literally. And I just remember like reading the magazines and just like, and they'd be like, oh, look, so-and-so's doing whatever. So-and-so's wearing this or something. And I remember thinking, like, you guys could roll them up in a donut roll, with the fact that they were a celebrity made all the difference. And I just kept thinking, this is the path forward if this is going to be my business. And so I was very strategic about it. And, the basics were there. I loved events. I loved creating these like crazy, snarky experiences. We were good at doing events. We create our own props. We do all that stuff. So those things were all there. I mean, it wasn't like I could just be like, oh, hi. But it was a strategy. And these days, I think more than ever, it's got to be a strategy, to be successful in events. I mean, it is freaking cutthroat.
It is tough. And something that I'm going to throw at you is this idea, especially and this is not a critique or a criticism of younger people coming into the industry, but younger people I've found over here in the UK particularly, who are coming into the events industry, sometimes come in with a bit of a sort of a doughy-eyed approach to it, where they think that they're going to come straight into the glamorous end of organizing, Beyonce's next tour and etc. etc. And they don't realize that actually when they step into the industry for the first time, their first job is probably going to be in some hotel banqueting suite, organizing weddings once a week or twice a week, for the next
Their
6 months.
first
You have to be prepared to do the groundwork at the bottom.
Their first job and their 200th job and their 299th. I mean, my dad used to say, like, I was like the most educated dishwasher he ever knew, because that's, when it's your deal, guess what? Somebody doesn't show up. Somebody wants to leave early. Somebody's in overtime. You can't leave Miss XYZ celebrities and be like, oh, whatever, so-and-so left. It's like, okay, then it gets done. And I don't think people realize, especially now more and more with social media, like, I mean, it is dirty, heavy work. And people be like, my gosh, you're like really strong. And I was like, yeah, because I've spent my whole life like moving tables and, stacking chairs and
carrying props and furniture,
moving a couch, and somebody going, okay, we're going to tape this right now. And you're like, oh, hi, didn't even know that. Okay, couch, like, let me put my blouse on. It is a very, to do well, it takes time and it takes a lot of commitment. And
you have to be hands-on, don't you? You have to be present there, because if you want to develop a reputation as somebody who can deliver, you have to be visibly showing that you're willing to put the work into that client. And that's half the battle, I think. If the client sees you doing that hard work, they will go, wow, she worked for her money and she delivered the event she promised.
Yeah. And it's also, though, we can't forget the component of positioning and branding, so along the lines of like, okay, the client, she worked hard and she deserves it. Okay, 100%. First of all, you got to be there for many reasons, because there's so many things that will go wrong, and that makes or breaks an event. But on top of it, there's that whole piece of like, if we deconstruct how much a Chanel purse costs to buy, right? It's probably not that much more expensive than a lot of other purses, but it certainly costs a lot more, right? And it's because of this whole marketing component around it that gets people to be like, I have to have it. And I think when you're a planner out there these days, in any aspect, whether you're running a venue or anything, you have to go and create that mystique, whatever that is. It can't be false, but it has to be something. And we talk about in marketing, this creating the story and why people fall in love with people and brands and identity. And it's true. They have to have something that makes you just want to, like, oh my gosh, like whether it's aspirational or something else, because they're not going to pay the fees that you have to command, because there is so much work and so many expenses behind the scenes, which I talk a lot about in my book, like why so many of us are in these creative businesses and we're not making any money, because we don't realize, wow, it's the FedEx charge on the linens that I didn't order, and now, oh, by the way, there's a shipping delay, and now there's, and it's
the client wants an exclusive bottle of scotch imported,
right, and you're like, okay,
overnight,
and you price it for them, right? But you didn't, you kind of guesstimated the shipping or whatever, and the next thing you know, I mean, you're just eating your lunch on all those things, but that's what you have to do. And a lot of people don't realize that it's like, if I put a price to my client, well, guess what? And something goes wrong and I've quoted it, and that's on me then. I'm eating that, and that all just is like chink, chink, chink into your bottom line. So it's a very long-winded answer to whatever.
Well, no, but there's something that you touched on there, which is the aspirational aspect as well. People are attracted to things that they think are out of their reach or slightly out of their reach. If a restaurant is full and you can't get a reservation there for 6 months, there's something attractive about that. There's something that says, wow, we need to book that for 7-8 months, so whenever we can get in. If something is out of reach of somebody, it creates that aspiration to want to use it. And if you can paint a picture as a business owner and as an event organizer and as a party planner of something that, wow, I'd love her to organize my wedding, but she there's no way I could afford her. There's no way I could do that. If you can even paint that picture, even if it's smoke and mirrors, it puts you in a good position.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's kind of like, it's a little bit like dating when, there's the girl who's like so nice and so amazing and so like but available, right? And then don't we know the story? I mean, a million movies are made about the one that's kind of it's just a little bit out of reach. And I think like we're just wired to want a little bit of the chase, and some people want more of the chase. And they've done a lot of studies that there is a certain percentage of the population that as soon as you price it just like something in the stratosphere, that percentage will always bite, because they want to be that person. Like we have, we would get the Neiman Marcus catalog, a million years ago when you're getting the big Christmas book. And I remember seeing these things like the $50,000 little, car for kids or something, or the, some champagne martini, blah, blah, blah for $20,000. And you're like, who's going to buy that? And then when I finally started looking at some of these neuroeconomic studies, you realize those things are placed there just for that percentage of people who just wants to be the person that says, oh, I got that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Wider a lot of restaurants most restaurants carry champagne, but why do you only see a few magnums in the back of the fridge?
exactly.
Why do you only see one Nebuchadnezzar at the side? It's because on the day that one person comes in and says, I'll have the Nebuchadnezzar, please, of champagne,
Right.
Everyone in that restaurant will turn and go, holy shit, look at those guys with their gigantic bottle.
Right. And now, mind you, right, the credit card might get declined at the end of the meal paying for that, but it doesn't matter, right? Because it's all about oh, wait, who's that? And so I think in this industry or in business, especially now, you've got to really think about your business component. Like, what is your secret sauce going to be? What makes you so special that people are going to want to like pay more than everybody else down the line? And it's unfortunate sometimes because we want to just do this because we love it. But if that's the case, then you have to just keep it as a hobby and do it for your friends instead of, doing it for actually to make a living and pay your mortgage.
Yeah, maybe there's a lesson there in what we've just spoken of, which is for businesses to have that one thing that they only need to sell one of.
Yeah.
That they tell everybody about, and they know that 99% of their clients are going to say, I can't afford that. But they need that one thing that one client can buy, because it purely gives them the opportunity to say to everybody else, oh,
exactly.
This is this, and it's slightly out of your reach. There is that aspiration thing. I'd love to get into some of the, I suppose the sort of the more, some may say mundane, I say day-to-day excitement of organizing events, and get some of the stories, because for us in the UK there is something exotic and attractive and exciting when you say, I'm talking to an event planner that's based in LA. We've all seen the movies, we all get this instant image of the blue sky and the Hollywood Hills,
and it is a beautiful blue sky today, I will tell you. I mean, it's gonna be 80 degrees and it's the day before Thanksgiving, and I'm sitting here going, oh, but I love rain, like why can't it be Dublin London weather? I mean, which is the grass is always greener, or the sky is always bluer.
Well, we're ready to be indulged, certainly for the listeners and people who are listening to this in the UK and in Europe at the moment. We would love to get a couple of stories from you. Tell us about some of the stuff you've worked on recently, stuff that's coming up, or any events that really stick in your mind, and some names that you can drop into that.
Yeah, so this one is a great story, which I'll tell you, which I can't drop the name, but then I'll tell you some other ones that I can drop the names. But
great.
This one is so significant because it is very, very high profile client, billionaire, and newly married or about to be. And so the new wife was in charge of, this kind of big coming out event. And one of the things they'd done is this house had been under construction forever. So finally, they're going to fill this Olympic-sized swimming pool and have 9,000 of their best friends over. Not really 9,000, but And she was like, "Well, what kind of entertainment could we do?" And she was like, "Maybe synchronized swimmers, maybe." And then she wanted cavalia, the horses. And I was like, okay, no worries. But even in those days, before quarantine, there was a quarantine. And I was like, those horses, you are going to pay for those horses to come from, I think they were coming from Spain or something at that point, from their previous gig. They're all going to quarantine. Then they're going to get here. They're going to have a certain amount of time to practice because, of course, she had like a riding rink and all that stuff. And I was just like, okay, well, what else, And so then she wanted dolphins to swim in the pool, the trained dolphins. And I was like, okay, hi, I'll do anything you want, right? I'm within reason. But I said, we're going to have PETA. They're going to be at the back door. You and this new life you are creating here around being whatever, ecologically responsible and whatever. And we're going to have dolphins in that pool for your gazillion-dollar event. Yeah. Okay. They're going to be like beating down the gate, and it's just amazing that there are really people out there who are like, well, just bring in Cavalia. Or just bring in the dolphins to just swim. I mean, can you have your listeners imagine?
I think what that there are people out there are people out there who, when it gets to a certain point of financial wealth, that it really doesn't become a consideration for them anymore.
No.
What, 150,000 to bring some horses in from Spain? Yeah, fine, great.
Send me
the bill. Not a problem at all. It's like me clicking go on a new cable for my laptop off of Amazon. It does become that mundane for them at that level of wealth.
Like whatever. And then the other thing that was there's a billion stories, right? A lot of
I'm laughing at dolphins in swimming pools. It's
just literally imagine. Just think for a second. What are you going to have? The truckload of dolphins? I mean, dolphins swim, right? Like how, transport, so we transport them even to the side of the pool. What are they in a chute coming in? It's just mind-boggling. Not to mention the fact that the whole thing would have had
like Wet and Wild. Get a big slide.
Be Wet and Wild, all right, on for many, many reasons. But another one that I just remember is when we did this event for Britney Spears, and we were doing I can't think of anything for that event we weren't doing. We were doing every aspect of it. Okay, the centerpieces, the rentals, the decor, the entertainment, everything. So the reason I say that is because if there was an issue, it would come back to us, right?
Of course, yeah. The buck stops with you.
We were the point person. And so, you sign the confidentiality agreements and all this stuff. And I take that stuff very seriously. So I've got everybody down the line signing the confidentiality agreements and the whole thing. And then I remember as it's getting closer and closer, and this is one of the times I started to realize, wow, this is how the game is played. And some of this came out in magazines, so I can say it. But all of a sudden, it was this one store that is very famous for doing the gift bag, the swag and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They somehow leaked when I was going to be picking the stuff up, because I was supposed to pick the gift bags up and then deliver them to this house where it was going to be. It was at one of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills house, and I was supposed to deliver it. And then I was like, oh my God, well, of course I hadn't leaked it, right? And so, but to me, I was like, oh my God, Britney Spears camp is going to think that I leaked it. And so I was like, no. So I made it so that the gift bags were coming back to my house, and then, there'd be a day delay, and I was, all this the black ops and this whole thing. And then I remember the day of, and we're setting up, and there are helicopters, and the helicopters are flying so low. When people talk about that, it's scary. It is freaking scary because you have kids, you have whatever. And I remember just being like, oh my God, there's only one way the helicopters could know. And I was like, I had put every contract under a different name. I had put everything. I was like, there is no way. But then what you start to realize is all these celebrities, to be celebrities, right? There are a lot of players, and the manager is one player and their publicist is another player, right? And their agent is another player, and their lawyer. Everybody has a different agenda slightly. One gets paid by a percentage, one has got to clean up some media stuff. So people are leaking, right, for their agenda. And at the end of the day, it's often, not often, really often leaked intentionally or strategically leaked.
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized, oh my gosh, here I am shouldering Mount Olympus for me, going, oh, I don't want to mess it up, and I'm taking this so responsibly. And only to find out that that's just part of the game. They're going to leak it to this publicist, and they're going to leak it to this magazine. And then sure enough, it was amazing. Now it's a double-edged sword because you can leak all kinds of things and they flip on you. So it was, I just remember being like, wow, this is crazy. And just shout out to poor Jamie Spears, who's gotten, Jamie and Brittany's dad.
Yeah.
And the mom, Lynn, I mean, I feel like I want to be their publicist because I'm telling you, those people are the nicest people in the world. And talk about two people who had her best interest at stake, at least the entire time I had anything ever to do with them. And it was just like, they just wanted her to be happy and protected and have this great party and the whole thing. But I remember being so stressed out. And then all of a sudden I saw the pictures in People magazine. I was like, oh yeah, that was me. You forget all that. It's like childbirth, right? You're like, oh.
On a serious note, when you get to, what is, and I've no hesitation in saying the elite level, when you're dealing with that sort of level of client and that level of celebrity,
Yeah.
can you confidently say now that with the integrity that you practice and deliver your own business, and with the reputation that you've now got built up over, 2 decades of doing this, can you sit a bit more comfortably now when you see something like that happen, when you think, that's clearly a publicist that's leaked that?
Oh, like 100%.
Is it water off a duck's back now to you?
Oh, completely. Because I know I'm so compulsive. I mean, that's probably what makes me good at what I do. Like, I'm going to notice the linen that is, a half an inch off the floor, or the seam that's inside out on something, So I now go into it eyes wide open. First of all, that this is a business transaction, right?
Yeah.
Contracts need to be signed, deposits need to be paid. It is business. It is not starstruckness. It's not love. It's business. And I think when you go in with that attitude and are like, nope, sorry, yes, that needs to be initialed. Yes, that change order has to, like, I know it's all good. We're going to be good, but it has to be. And so should something slip through the cracks, if, like, I know that I will be standing there with paper confidentiality agreements, for people to sign in case the electronic one didn't go through, or I'm just a real stickler for that. So if anybody, and sometimes, they try to act like, oh, well, was somebody on I'm like, oh, hell no, it was not. If you would like to see all the measures we put in place, bring it on,
But that's where the iPhone or whatever you use now really comes into its own, because, going back to when you started the business in 2000 and you're using an old Nokia or Sony cell phone, I bet now to be able to just grab the phone out of your pocket, whiz through your emails or whiz through a document folder and say, there are your contracts.
And it has saved me on so many occasions where, and sometimes, and I can think of one instance in particular where it was like I was sitting with the person and they had agreed, and we were having this conversation and nothing had happened in the past or anything, but I just was like, could you just please reply? Even just, she's like, well, we're talking about it right now. I was like, I know, but can you just reply yes or approved or something, just so that we're on the same page? Sure enough, she replied yes. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of on her end. Like, well, I didn't. I was like, okay, and you did, and here you go. Because you have to. It's not about thinking anybody's up to anything. It's just about, there's a lot of communication flying around, and people are busy, and sometimes they forget, and people make honest mistakes, and you just want to know that your honest mistakes are going to land with a yes, in your inbox.
And I have to say, whilst most people's phones are populated of, pictures of their kids dancing or, photos of their dog, I look through my phone and most of them are photos of something that I've done at an event that I've just snapped a couple of photos of evidence. And it's got me not out of jail, but it's settled a few debates on more than one occasion. Just last week, I was building a stage for an awards event, and we had a musical act performing who'd performed at the previous event, and I'd give them all the specs, and the specs were identical to when they'd performed previously. Absolutely identical. And the first thing they did is they came in and they said, that stage is smaller than last time.
Oh,
and it was such an easy
No.
discussion to just nip in the bud, because I just went into a folder on my phone. I got up the photos of the stage in 2019 that I took before a stitch of production had been put on top of it,
Mhm.
and you can
Mhm.
count the stage blocks.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like Lego. You can see it, and there it is. It's the same size. It's the
Right.
same one that's been built this year.
And it's just about being good at your job. It's just about that being your default. Like I always, like when we go into a venue or something, because you pay, you have a security deposit or damage deposit, whatever it's going to be.
Mm.
And so when I get to a venue, I am like, this stain is on the carpet. Like, I have my timestamp photos. I'm like, okay, hi, here's all the things that, it's no problem. Nobody's going to see it. But don't even think that you're coming back to me later to replace the carpet.
Yeah, and saying, "Oh, red wine stain." No, that
like
was there.
it's kind of like when you get up the car from the valet or whatever, and they're like, okay, this dent was here, this dent was here, this dent was here. Do we all agree? Yes. And then it comes back with the same dents. Everybody's fine. It comes back with like a few more, and okay, but I'm not going to be paying for all the dents on this car that it's had for its whole life. So it's turned so much into the business of event planning. It really has. And
it has to happen though, especially when there's that sort of, that level of finance at stake. When you're talking with the budgets and the quality of the venues that you must be working in, you're talking, six figures sometimes maybe on top of the bill if something's gone wrong or if you haven't seen something.
Well, and I just, that whole, the whole world, I think, has heard of that whole movie thing with Alec Baldwin with Rush.
Sure, yeah.
And, I always just go, as soon as something like that happens, is like, you feel so horrible and you think, oh my God, like it's just so sad. And then, after a while, then it sort of kicks in and I go to the business component and I'm like, oh God, because everybody's going to be sued. And it's the same movies, or it's the same thing with events. Every participant is going to get sued, which is already starting. You got Gloria Allred now representing some script supervisor. I'm like, how? Okay, but whatever. And we have to think of it that way in terms of events. And then you get to the insurance component. And I remember when I found out that set had like a $6 million umbrella policy and a $1 million per occurrence. And I was like, I have more insurance than that. Like, and I was not doing, there are no firearms involved at all in my, latest events.
Just dancing horses and dolphins.
Dancing horses and dolphins being unloaded with dolphins are probably worth more than God knows what. But I just was like, this is going to be a bloodbath. Like, no pun intended, because $1 million per occurrence, that's all that they're going to pay out, right? And then it's up to the $6 million, and you just start going, that these things are real wake-up calls to this is all great, but it's still a business, and you are responsible for people. And you have a cord that's going across something that's not taped down properly. And that's why events cost what they cost to be done by professional people. I mean, somebody trips and falls and does this or loses a couple forget it.
You're talking to the duct tape king here. Very rare you won't see me with a roll of tape on my wrist at any event. Just going around putting tape around everything. Cable, tape. Microphones, tape, vase of flowers, tape. It's on the floor. Put some white tape around it. At least if somebody trips over it, we can say that it was tape. They can see it.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to, and I suppose the example that you've just used there of Rust is that it's that, oh, it will never happen to us attitude, that unfortunately there are an awful lot of events that run brilliantly and are very well organizers, regardless of what they are. It could be a conference, an expo, a trade show, convention, a live music tour. Right. A lot of them are run well, but we have to admit and hold our hands up to the fact that there is still an awful lot of the industry and people who run events who don't do them according to all of the legislation and the legal requirements, with all the necessary insurances and safety checks and things like that. And they still operate under this thing of, it will never happen to me. Right. And unfortunately, what that has showed with Alec Baldwin is it could happen to you, and if it does, you will be royally screwed.
And you'll be toast for the rest of your life. I mean, can you imagine him? He has like 7 kids or something. I mean, and the wife and the whole. I mean, how do you? I mean, he just killed somebody, basically, at pretty close to point blank. I mean, that's
career killer. A career over.
Yeah. I mean, and depending on how he handles it, Hollywood is a very strange machine. He might be the next Oprah Winfrey. I mean, we don't know. But there are just a lot of things that you have to be mindful for. And I think at the end of the day, sometimes when, it comes down to price and like, oh, well, why does it cost this much? Or I'm going to go with this person because they're cheaper. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Just make sure that you see their proof of insurance and that it is valid and that you are named additionally insured and all these things, different terms than you guys have in the UK and around the world, but that we have here.
Hey, the fundamentals are the same. The terms may be different, but the fundamentals are the same.
And when you open the client's eyes to that, and then they go, oh, it's like, listen, I don't have just this extra fat margin that I'm just saying, oh, listen, just pay me. No, it's because of this, and this that adds up. And if you're getting that price, something is wrong. Like those shoes are not Chanel. They are somebody saying they're Chanel.
Do you know what I feel like today, Marley? Because I've got one eye on the clock, unfortunately, which I have to when we're doing this, because I know our audience and I know how long they like to listen into this.
Yeah.
But I feel that what we've done is open Pandora's box of us slightly with talking to you today.
Yeah.
And this could potentially become something regular on the Event Industry News podcast, where we dive into the world of the party goddess to see what you're working on at the moment, because there's so many other things that I'm sure we could touch on that would be relevant to the people that listen to this, that you've got experience of and you could share some knowledge of. And I would like, and I put you on the spot by saying, come on again.
Yeah.
Come on and let's talk about something else. And if you're listening to this today, tweet us at Event News Blog. Tell us what you'd like us to put to Marley, and we'll get her back on in the new year. Yeah. And let's find out if you're happy for us to pick your brains.
100%. I might have to fly there to do it. I might have to be like, I'm going to fly there just to kind of hang out in London because I'm doing me a podcast and I'm going to be in the next room.
Well, some of us are coming to you next year. Event Tech Live, which we are very closely associated with, is as many of our podcast followers will already be aware. Event Tech Live announced at its London show a few weeks ago that it is launching Event Tech Live USA in Vegas in June. So we are taking the Event Tech Live show over to Vegas in June next year, and I'm hopefully going to be part of that production team as I am on the Event Tech Live UK show. So.
This is when I was watching Bloomberg, when I was in UK and they're doing the Singapore conference, and they were all excited because they were like live with all these people in Singapore. And I was like, that'll be like, finally, I see you. You're in London. I'm from LA. Now we're all together in Vegas. Yeah. So I would love that. It'd be super fun.
We'll catch up with it. We've been talking on the podcast today to LA's #1 event planner, the party goddess herself, Marley Majcher. She's joined us today to share some history, some experiences. And as I said, we've literally scratched the surface of what we could talk about with Marley. It's been a real pleasure, as I said, having followed you on social media for a few years now, to actually get a chance to have a chat with you. And genuinely, thank you for coming on the podcast today and having a chat with us.
Well, thank you. I do not take this stuff for granted. And I appreciate that the interest is there. And it's kind of just nice to be in a spot in your career where you can go, okay, yeah, I've been there, seen that, and then help other people, because it does feel overwhelming. That's obviously why you, I'm sure, do what you do as well. So yeah, love it.
Absolutely. If you want to find out more about what Marley and her team do, there's some links up on the screen at the moment if you're watching the video version of this on eventindustryknews.com. If you're listening to this as an audio version, marleymajcher.com, and that's Major, MAJCHER, marleymajcher.com is where to go to, and also thepartygoddess.com. And both of those websites are interlinked. So if you land on either one of those, I've done that this afternoon myself, you'll find it really easy to navigate between all the different things that Marley's got going on and find out a little bit more. And of course, if you go on any of your social media platforms and search for Marley Majcher, then as I said, you will definitely find her, and I would recommend that you follow her. There's some great stuff on there. There's some great stuff on the blog recently, particularly for our US listeners, stuff about Thanksgiving and table settings and all sorts of great stuff. Really appreciate it today, Marley. Of course, to all of our own followers, if you are watching this, as I said, on eventindustryknews.com, then hello to you all. Thanks for tuning in on the website. And whilst you're here, make sure you click around some of the other areas of the website, check out the latest news, features, and supplements that are on eventindustrynews.com. And of course, there is the audio version of all of our podcasts available via your chosen podcast platform. It's out there to listen to, and over 250 episodes now, featuring all sorts of people and topics from across this broad spectrum of life that we call the events industry. It brings us to the end of today's episode. It's been great to talk to Marley Majcher, who's joined us today from her base in LA. We'll see her again on the podcast next year, but for now, we're going to finish today. Thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next edition of the Event Industry News podcast.